Lesson 5, The Handwriting on the Wall, Daniel chapter 5, verses 1 to 31. Review and Introduction of Belshazzar. God took away King Nebuchadnezzar's mind so that he behaved like an animal for 7 years. Then King Nebuchadnezzar one day looked up to God in humility and repentance, and God restored his mind so that he could think clearly again. Nebuchadnezzar, the once proud king of Babylon, became a humble believer in the true God. Drastic means had been used by God to humble King Nebuchadnezzar before he would acknowledge God's rule in the kingdom of man. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom had also been restored to him when he acknowledged God as the ruler of all the earth and the one who gives earthly power to whomsoever he wishes. The mighty monarch praised and honored Daniel's God, proclaiming to all his subjects throughout the world the wisdom, the power, and the everlasting kingdom of the Most High God. Not only did the peoples of the world hear Nebuchadnezzar's testimony, but those in his own palace and family could see even more than others the mighty power of God. The next ruler of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar's son, certainly had every opportunity to start his kingship honoring the true God of heaven and earth, but instead, Belshazzar sat on the throne of Babylon, behaving as if there were no God and as if Nebuchadnezzar had never had that horrible, humbling experience. Belshazzar defiles the temple. King Belshazzar seemed to think that nothing could go wrong in his Babylon. He called his lords, his princes, his wives, and his concubines together to make merry at the great feast he had prepared for them. The lavishly decorated banquet hall was filled with the odor of burning incense as dignitaries from the realm gathered for the king's feast. Trays of exotic dishes were brought in, and wine flowed freely. The king stood at his golden throne. He had drunk enough wine to make him foolish and daring. He wanted to do something that no Babylonian king had ever done before, and probably too drunk to think of the consequences of his action. He commanded that the golden and silver vessels from the king's treasure house be brought to the banquet hall. This had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem. Nebuchadnezzar had taken these vessels from Jerusalem when he took captive the Jewish people, among whom were Daniel and his three friends. For years, these gold and silver vessels had been stored in the treasure house of a heathen god in Babylon and were unused. Now Belshazzar was commanding that these holy vessels from Jerusalem's temple be brought to him. The servants went to get the holy vessels and soon returned with trays containing the gleaming silver and gold cups and bowls that had been used in the worship of the true God in the temple of Jerusalem. Belshazzar commanded that the holy goblets be filled with wine and passed to all the guests. Raising one of the golden goblets to his lips, the drunken King Belshazzar began to drink, and then all the guests also began to drink from the holy vessels of the true God. With these holy vessels, they praised their heathen gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, and stone. Everyone was laughing, talking, and drinking to their idols. Suddenly, Belshazzar stopped his drinking and talking. The guests became quiet as they noticed a look of horror on the king's face. He pointed toward the wall of the palace. Then they saw what he saw. A large hand was writing words on the wall. Yes, a hand, unattached to a body, was writing a message before their very eyes. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. After the hand had written the words on the wall, the hand disappeared, but the words clearly remained imprinted on the wall for all to see. Whose hand was it? What would these words mean? King Belshazzar became so frightened at this strange event that his knees began to knock together. Deep in his heart, he knew, as all men know, that there is a God in heaven and that God will not ignore man's sin forever. Belshazzar seemed to sense that this mysterious message was a message of doom for him. Seeing Belshazzar so frightened, the guests also began to tremble. A hush settled over the crowd. They had never seen anything so eerie before. As soon as he could speak, King Belshazzar called aloud for his wise men to be brought to him. How much better if he had called out to God, but the pagan king was too proud for that. When the wise men and counselors hurriedly assembled, Belshazzar pointed to the writing on the wall with a shaking hand and proclaimed, "Whoever will read this handwriting to me and tell me its meaning will be clothed in scarlet and will have a gold chain around his neck and be made the third ruler in the kingdom." Belshazzar was offering to any wise man or counselor the great honor of being next in command in the kingdom, the third ruler of all the kingdom of Babylon, to anyone who could read and interpret the writing on the wall. The wise men looked at the handwriting on the wall and were as frightened and bewildered as Belshazzar. They could read the words because the words were written in the language they knew, but they could not interpret the meaning. All they knew was that the words said, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin, or number, number, weight, and division. But what could this strange message mean? Where did the hand come from that wrote on the wall? By this time, Belshazzar was shaking even more. He had to know the meaning of the strange words on the wall. When the wise men could not tell him the meaning, he ranted against them, calling them worthless idiots. A great solemn hush had fallen over the wild party. Everyone was now very solemn. Some guests quietly slipped away, fearful of what would happen next. The queen mother, Belshazzar's mother, had not attended the banquet, but someone went to tell her about the handwriting on the wall and Belshazzar's dilemma. She, therefore, quickly made her way to the great banquet hall. The guests made way for her as she approached the throne where Belshazzar stood trembling. The queen mother said to Belshazzar, "O king, live forever. Do not be troubled by the writing on the wall. There is a man in the kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. Your father found him to be very wise and understanding and made him the chief of the wise men. He can interpret dreams and explain mysteries. His name is Daniel, whom King Nebuchadnezzar called Belteshazzar. Let Daniel be called to interpret the writing." The queen had called Daniel by his Hebrew name, which means God is my judge. Maybe the queen mother had also put her trust in Daniel's God. Daniel interprets the handwriting. The king summoned Daniel to be brought immediately. Daniel was now an old man, probably about 85 years or older. He had been in the wicked city of Babylon for many years, and all that time he had remained true to his God. When Daniel appeared, Belshazzar said, "Are you Daniel, a captive of Judah? I have heard of you that you are very wise. My wise men cannot explain to me the meaning of this handwriting on the wall, but I have heard that you can interpret such things. If you can tell me the meaning, I will clothe you in the scarlet, put a gold chain around your neck, and make you the third ruler in the kingdom." Daniel said, "I am not interested in your gifts, O king, but I will read the writing on the wall to you and interpret it. O king, the Most High, God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. He gave him dominion over the peoples of the world. King Nebuchadnezzar did as he pleased with the people. He killed them or allowed them to live, whatever he wished. But when his heart was exalted in pride, Most High God took his kingdom from him, and he was driven from the sons of men to live with the wild beasts of the field for 7 years. And he ate like the oxen and was drenched with dew like an animal until he recognized that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and appoints over it whomsoever he wills. Belshazzar stared intently at Daniel. "Yes, yes, I know all about what happened to the great king of Nebuchadnezzar, who reigned before me. But what do I care about that? How does that pertain to me?" he asked. Daniel went all boldly, "And you, his son, O Belshazzar, although you knew all this, have not humbled your heart before God, but have insulted the Most High by drinking wine out of his holy vessels. You have used God's holy cups to drink to your idols of silver, gold, wood, and stone, gods that can never see, hear, nor understand. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and your destiny, you have not glorified." Belshazzar was motionless, his face white with fear. The banquet hall was as still as death. Yes, Belshazzar knew all that had happened to King Nebuchadnezzar, and being a son, he also knew of his father's personal faith in the God of heaven and earth. For the whole world had heard Nebuchadnezzar's testimony, and especially his family knew of it in a greater way than the rest of the world. This made Belshazzar even more responsible and accountable before God. Belshazzar was certainly not ignorant of the true God, but he just chose to act as if there were no God. Nobody in the great banquet hall moved as Daniel continued. "This is what the message means. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and put an end to your reign. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and failed to test. Peres, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians." God's message to Belshazzar was that his rule was finished and the great kingdom of Babylon was fallen. Even as Daniel was saying these words to Belshazzar, the armies of the Medes and Persians were outside the huge, thick walls of the great city of Babylon. The city was protected by walls so thick that 6 chariots could drive abreast on top of the walls, and the walls were surrounded by deep canals of water. Belshazzar had been sure that no army could ever overcome these obstacles and enter the great stronghold of Babylon. But the army of Medes and Persians had devised a clever way to enter the fortified city. They dug a large canal to divert the water of the riverbed and change the course of the river. Thus, the Medes and the Persians were entering the city of Babylon at that very moment through the dry riverbed where the Euphrates River had flowed. In a short while, they would be inside the city and in control of the kingdom of Babylon. Belshazzar would shortly be not only dethroned, but also dead. Belshazzar, not knowing all of this, commanded his servants to bring a scarlet robe and a golden chain to put upon Daniel as he had promised. Belshazzar then pronounced Daniel the third ruler of the kingdom. But it meant nothing, for in a few short hours, Belshazzar's kingdom was taken over by the Medes and the Persians. That very night, Darius, the Mede, the ruler appointed by the great king Cyrus of Persia, captured the great city of Babylon, and Belshazzar and all his army were killed. The great Babylonian empire fell to the Medes and the Persians, even as Daniel had prophesied so many years before in Nebuchadnezzar's dream of an image represented by the silver shoulders and arms. Though Belshazzar knew all about how God had humbled Nebuchadnezzar, and through God gave Belshazzar time to turn from his evil ways and turn to the true God, Belshazzar never repented and never turned to God. World leaders may have their way for a while, but God judges them also. One day, Jesus will come and rule with a rod of iron. He will be the judge of the world's nations, as he is already the judge of our personal thoughts and actions. He numbers our days and keeps track of everything that happens to us and all that we do. He weighs our thoughts, words, and actions to see if they are good and right. He divides our deeds as to good and evil. God is judge in our lives, and every day we need to ask Him to lead, guide, and teach us in His way. He spoke these words to us: be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man sows, that shall he also reap. For he that sows to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. But he that sows to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. Galatians 6, verses 7 to 8. Without him, we can do nothing that is worth doing. He loves to hear us admit that to him and ask for his strength each day. Many people today are like Belshazzar. They know the way to be saved. That is through coming to Jesus Christ as a sinner and receiving the free gift of forgiveness and salvation. But they choose their own way and refuse Jesus in their life. The handwriting on the wall is for all of us. It tells us we need to pay attention to what God says, to ask Him to save us while there is opportunity. It tells us that God controls our destiny even as He controlled Nebuchadnezzar's destiny. Don't wait to come to Him to be saved. Call to Him today.